It's your hurtin' hippie, Gord Birch with Weedy Weekend number 61. Got quite a few stories for you this week. Sorry it was late, but it is a long weekend. And in fact, it's an unusual long weekend. It doesn't happen too often, every 5 or 6 years, where the Canadian long weekend is Friday, Canada Day, and the American long weekend is Monday, July 4, both our Independence Days. I won't go on about that because I already posted something that a lot of you disagree with on me not being a patriotic Canadian. I love Canada. I love Canada's people. I just don't love countries. I think they're wrong. That's just your hippie. But let's get on with the name of the game here, and that's cannabis news. Cannabis news. That's what I do, and that's what I bring you. Today, we start with the medical side of things. What's new this week? Well, the first one is herpes. Yuck. Nobody likes the idea of it. Nobody likes the thought of it, but it's been around forever. And just like cold sores, they say there's no cure for it. But they have found that THC, not the CBD, but THC works really well on reducing, and maybe with more tests, getting rid of the virus. It also reduces the time in which you are susceptible to sharing the virus. It's a good story. I've got it below, and I will read one piece on it, and then we'll have a cheers to that. THC weakly binds with cannabinoid receptors present in the brain and lymphoid cells. In these tissues, cannabinoid receptors influence immune signaling and viral gene activation in response to THC binding and dosage. This study concluded that THC inhibits viral lytic replication, viral reproduction. Inhibits by interfering with DNA replication mechanisms in a dose-dependent manner. Very unique. This in itself should say study a hell of a lot more, because this could be a possible cure. Every time we turn a corner, there's more and more solved by this. And as most of you know who have been following me, I was told recently I have COPD. Mild. I'm going to look after it. I don't smoke as much anymore. I will smoke some with you, because we all know, as I've shared it, cannabis helps the lungs, helps rebuild the lungs. But the least amount of, shall we say, carcinogens you can put in there, the quicker it can work. So I have switched a lot back to my vape. Cheers. It's a pretty good vape. And right now I have Rare Dankness #1 in there from MMJ Total Healthcare. A fantastic thing to cheers with. Let's move on to the next medical piece of this week. And this one is Alzheimer treatments breakthroughs with cannabis. Absolutely fantastic. This story, in a nutshell, goes on to say that not only have they discovered that THC, again, THC, remember, we got to keep understanding that CBD helps THC and THC helps CBD. And there are many other, 100 and some odd other chemicals in that plant. So keep that in mind. But everyone always points to CBD as being the medicine, THC getting you high. It ain't the case. Ain't the case. Now, one of the biggest myths spread by anti-marijuana groups is that pot is bad for your brain. However, there are studies that can prove the opposite is true. Just as I just said about pot and your lungs, pot and your brain. It helps. It helps in every part of the body. It is a pure medicine. I'm going to read this. Now again, as this story goes on to say, is not only does THC inhibit the growth of Alzheimer's, it is pointing to the fact, more study needed, pointing to the fact that it can also hold off Alzheimer's by creating a situation with the THC in the brain that the film that goes on the brain that causes Alzheimer's, if you study it, that's what it is, can't adhere to the brain and can't cause that problem. So now let me read this. According to Chunhei Sao, lead authority of the study, I don't know his name very well, I probably said it wrong, THC is known to be a potent antioxidant and with neuroprotective properties. But this is the first report that the compound directly affects Alzheimer's pathology by decreasing amyloid beta levels, inhibiting its aggression. Sao, a neuroscientist at the Bird Alzheimer's Institute and the USF College of Pharmacology, also added decreased levels of amyloid beta means less aggregation, which may protect against the progression of Alzheimer's disease. Since THC is a natural and relatively safe amyloid inhibitor, THC or its analogs may help us develop an effective treatment in the future. That, my friends, is huge. I had an uncle, Uncle Ted. It was sad to see Alzheimer's take him on. Really sad to see it. So I've seen it firsthand, and I'll always remember visiting him. And we spent months with this man, and he didn't recognize me. That's a sad thing. Violator Kush. Cheers. Now, why am I not worried? Some of you, most of you understand this. Some of you may ask, why am I not worried with COPD and why am I smoking? COPD is not a killer. Look after it, your lungs get better. I probably had COPD worse 8 years ago when I quit smoking. I quit cigarettes 8 years ago, almost 9. I'm in my 9th year. I smoked for 35 years. I smoked over a pack a day, usually 2. So that's what caused it. And I'm squeaking my way out of it. More tests will prove that. But this is not going to exacerbate it. It's just going to slow down the repair. And I don't do a lot of it anyway. I don't smoke a lot of flower. I make rosin. I just don't have any right now because I've had really sore shoulders. Now, let's move on. One more medical piece here, and this one inappropriately titled, Tampons are the next marijuana-infused product for women. Then it goes on to talk about its product called Foria. Foria is not a woman's tampon. So let me tell you that right away. I don't read the whole stories, but I read the whole stories. I don't read them to you. But what this talks about, it talks about Foria, which is a vaginal suppository, not a tampon. And how it works and how it is the same or the actual product that Oprah Winfrey has started. But, no, Whoopi Goldberg, sorry. And it talks about that. But they talk only about a cannabis-infused tampon while showing the only product that's out there, a cannabis-infused vaginal suppository. Regardless of the method of delivery, yes, I think women would prefer to not have to put a suppository of medicine there when they already have to use a tampon, but some women don't use them. I don't want to get into that. But what I do want to get into is hooray. This story goes on to talk about how many of the different areas, states are starting to look at adding menstrual cramps as a qualifying syndrome or position to start from to get medical cannabis. And that is good. The really good news, aside from telling, I don't even want to read this. They got here, the really good news. Aside from telling your friends that you've got weed in your vagina, FORIA Relief offers a range of benefits over traditional menstrual medications. Women who suffer from severe menstrual cramps finally have a safe alternative to pharmaceutical painkillers, and the capsules could prove to be effective pain management for women with endometriosis. I know a few. So, endometriosis. And it goes on. It talks about the author and talks about where you can find this kind of stuff. I think it's a positive step forward for women and for the entire medical community. Every time we turn a corner, there's something else that needs a little bit of cannabis. For this one, we are doing a dab because the next story just kind of tucks on my level. My machine's back here now. Cheers. I have the dab ready of Purple Voodoo. My friends, cheers. Because the next story is a wonderful story. It is called, Is It Time to Get Grandma and Grandpa Some Weed? And I say yes, because I'm Grandpa. I'm Grandpa to 6 children from 17 to 0, just born in April. So, is it time? Yes, it is. This story is a great story talking about how people 10 years older than me and up still have a difficult time understanding cannabis and its positivity towards them. The more and more, I've got many followers. One who talked about his grandma having horrible arthritis in her hands and how OxyContin was doing her in. And through talking with me and then with his doctor and his grandma and her doctor, and long and short, she's on CBD rub for her hands and doing so much better and no side effects. This is going around. I'll read this. Once the elderly reach age 65, their risk for several chronic and fatal conditions spikes dramatically. These include cancer, insomnia, chronic pain, Alzheimer's, and other neurodegenerative diseases, anxiety, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. The typical scenario is that once any of these illnesses manifest themselves, a senior will visit a doctor who will prescribe them pharmaceutical medicines that have often debilitating side effects that even lead to death. Prescription painkillers such as Vicodin, OxyContin, Demerol are among the opiates commonly prescribed to senior citizens. And with these drugs, an accidental overdose has become too easy. According to the American Society of Addiction Medicine, drug overdose deaths are the leading cause of accidental deaths in the United States. That's amazing. That's amazing. Let's get people off of these awful, awful pharmaceuticals. Yes, I've had a hard time getting off of them. It's been 3.5 months. We're coming on to 4. Actually, it's 4. July 4 will be 4 months that I've been off pharmaceuticals, and I still have issues with them. But had I never gone on pharmaceuticals in the first place, I wouldn't be having these issues. So I almost went back, and I did not. It's time to get Grandma and Grandpa some weed. And now we move into the political side of things. So for that, I'm sorry, I need some God Bud. Cheers, my friends. I had this ready. Kind of hard to talk about politics without some medicine in you. For those wondering, Pasha isn't here. Pasha's gone home to his mother. And I went almost the whole day without medicine. So this is going to hit me strong. And already, I started it with a very sore back. I've walked over 6,000 kilometers today. 6,000 kilometers. 6,000 steps. So I've walked about 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers. And had a very busy day and a bit of a sick one. So this is going to hit me good, and it is hitting me good. It's making me feel really good. This is I need to reorder this. Okay. This story made me mad. Congress strips the amendment allowing veteran access to medical marijuana. I shared this and I said, Americans, this is your elected representatives, your Congress, who stripped something that could have provided relief nationally for the people, protecting your people, your veterans. I'll read this, and yes, this makes me mad. I won't be cheersing to this, but I will follow up on. Blocking this amendment at the conference committee stage is an assault on democracy and those Americans who risk their lives and health to defend it, said Michael Lazewski, Government Affairs Director of Americans for Safe Access, ASA. It's, again quoting him, it's shocking that the House Appropriations Committee Chairman Hal Rogers, get that, Hal Rogers, HALROGERS, Hal Rogers, would allow a veteran's health care provision that won by wide margins in the Senate committee and on the House floor to be stripped from the bill behind closed doors. This amendment, stripped from this bill, the bill passed, the amendment did not. This amendment was passed by the floor overwhelmingly, and the Senate committee overwhelmingly. So this is what people want, yet gone. Gone. Shame on them. Shame on them. Somebody, many buddies, should lose their jobs. Period. Especially politicians. But this story I like because I've said it all along. The courts understand human rights. It's politicians who work on sparingly giving them out, while the courts consistently have to slap them on the wrists and say, you're not doling them out fast enough. These are their rights. You can't hold them back. It often happens, and here's a case. This one I will cheers to. Illinois judge orders the state to put PTSD on the list of qualifying conditions. Now, this is fantastic. I have 2 areas I want to go on this story. First of all, fantastic. The courts understand this has to be there. It has to be there. But not only that, this story does go on to talk about that they understand that once you've got a qualifying list of ailments that are covered by medical cannabis, they don't want to keep revisiting that list. But too bad, so sad. This medicine, watch my Weedy Weekend. Every single weekend, I report a new ailment that's covered by medical cannabis, that is corrected or solved or helped with medical cannabis. That's because we're at the beginning of this new medication. This, even though it's been around for 80 years, thousands of years, it hasn't been studied in-depthly enough. So we're going to, every time we turn a corner, we're going to find a new solution with this plant. So any legislation that is put forward should be with the understanding that it should be revisited by health professionals every year. The qualifying list should be created not by politicians. The qualifying list of medical ailments that are covered should be a decision of a doctor. Teach all your doctors, period, and let the doctors prescribe as needed for anything. Because sometimes, for me, pot doesn't help my anxiety very much unless I get the very specific kind. For other people, it helps huge. So a doctor needs to be able to have that freedom. not your politician. But, okay, so that's one of them. The other one is the understanding that our veterans worked and put their lives on line for us. I don't agree with any war, but I love the veterans because they're people that have a love of country that I can't understand or get my grip around, but I can accept and endorse and love of people. I'm from a different time. I'm from a different place. I'm from a social country and the 60s. So I can never get behind war. But I understand that we are a warring country. Shame on us. But if we're going to send our sons and daughters out there, then damn it, we better give them the best fucking protection when they get back that anybody gets. No politician should even be seen by a doctor before a veteran. They should be the top of the elite in our country. Period. Period. And that's from a guy who would never send his son and daughter. So I'm going to move. I am going to cheers to that with a vape. That's fantastic. More and more the courts are overruling the politicians. But I do think that those politicians should be held to the table for their crappy decision making. Anyways, now we move on to Colorado fighting. The Colorado people are fighting back and fighting this THC cap that they want to put on products. THC caps don't work. And they're stupid. It's like saying don't make extra strength Tylenol. Everyone should have to just take regular Tylenol. And if you're a great big man, you just got to take 6 of them. You know, absolutely stupid. Of course you concentrate your medicine so you take less of it. That's why this vaping, you know, people think that this is better. No, the concentrate behind me is better because one hit there is 7 or 8 hits here. That's a lot more ingestion. Anyways, the pure, the better. I will read this. So far, they already have 300,000 donations that are available to help them keep Amendment 139 off the ballots this year. And if it does manage to make the ballots, they will fight back even harder. They absolutely have the resources to do so, and they have the logic behind them as well. The Healthy Colorado Coalition wants to limit THC, which would effectively give an advantage to growing and selling on the black market. Once again, making their keeping the children safe argument invalid. Capping THC is not going to make pot less available to children. It's going to increase the black market because even then, people like me, if medically all I could buy is 15% THC or less, I'm not going to be buying any of the product. I'm going to find a grower that wants to grow something illegally. I will, because it makes no sense. And Roosevelt said, it is the duty, nay the privilege. It is a privilege, nay the duty of citizens to fight unjust laws. These laws are unjust. Fight them before they get there. Great one. Then we move on to second final story, and let's have another cheers. Well, we're doing good. We're 24 minutes in. I like to keep these around a half hour. Cheers. Again, in the vape is rare dankness number 1. Very good for muscle spasms. Right here is Violator Kush. Very good for insomnia. And man, last night I had bad insomnia, but we had big thunderstorms. I was up most of the night. Second last story is just something to enjoy for all of you, and it's Chef Jeff sets the standard in cannabis cooking. I don't agree with everything he says and does, but he's an incredible cook, and it's a good story. It's nice to read. The part I don't agree with him, he tends to state that a dose should only be 10 milligrams and that should be enough for a positive experience. And I think a chef, yes, a chef, if he's making for, say you're making it for a restaurant full of people, yeah, keep it to a 10 milligram dose. And if a person is not going to get that high off of that, especially anybody who's used to medicine. I eat about 150 milligrams a day. So 10 milligram dose, not very much, won't last long either. But if that's all you want from your edibles, then that's a good experience, you know? I tend to think that there should be, if I were to have a restaurant, and I've thought about it. I've really thought about it. The future is wide open in Canada here. If I were to have a restaurant, it would have probably the cannabis-infused sauces rather than cooking the meats and the veggies and everything in cannabis. Just sauces. And that way a person could order the sauce. I want the weak, medium, mild, super strong, whatever. And then, but let them be well aware of, you sprinkle that on, that's 10 milligrams. You pour that on, that's or sprinkle this next sauce on, and that's 100 milligrams, same amount of sauce. That way people don't have to adjust. The people need to adjust. This is a very specific personal medicine where what works for me doesn't work for you, and what works for you doesn't work for your mom. You know what I mean? Everybody adjusts after they first start taking. I agree with 10 milligrams as a dose for a brand new person. Always I agree. In fact, I always, when I make my own edibles, I won't give them to people who have never had them before because mine are too strong and people will accidentally take too much. That happens only with beginners. And remember, I had this discussion in Google this week, is the worst thing that happens if you eat too much is you're going to get tired and really, really happy. Yeah, you'll get anxious. Yeah, things kind of feel awful. Go sleep. Go sleep. Emergency wards should be told, don't accept people with that problem. Go to sleep. So, great, not your mother's cookbook, but some fantastic stuff here. Again, dosing, that's still out to be understood better. I think once the general public understands that the aim of all medicine is to get to purity, and a 15% THC flower is therefore 85% other stuff. But it's the THC you want, so why wouldn't you just pluck out that 15%? That's concentrating. Now it's 95%, but you only need a tiny, tiny bit of it. And you aren't getting any of the vegetable and fiber and carcinogens and everything else that's in that plant. It doesn't make sense to cap. We move on to the very last story. And this is a beautiful story. I'm going to read it to you, but I want you to understand. At first, I didn't understand it that well because I didn't make the connection. The craft beer industry grew in Canada. Took a while to grow in Canada because there was so much protection for the big bottlers that it was very, very difficult for the little beer guy to make it. Now in Canada, almost anywhere you go, you can find microbreweries and restaurants with a microbrewery in the basement, or they just brew their own. Really, really, the entire landscape changed, giving people more freedom. We are about freedom. People think that we're such a socialist country, and we tend to lean to the socialist ways, especially with healthcare. But the freedoms that we espouse and fight for and gain, I think, are stronger than in most places. Anyways, as Canada moves into the plan for legalization, many of us have talked about how difficult it looks like it's going to be for the small grower, the small dispensary, the craft of this industry. Yes, it's probably a good thing to have some major players out there. I don't like Tweed, don't like their business model, don't like their way of doing business, but the Tilrays of the world, the Metrums, the Auroras, the others that do fairly well and really are patient-based, but understand that they're big. They want into the big industry. The craft industry there's a possibility for a beautiful, beautiful industry of craft cannabis, just like craft brewing, craft growing, and craft dispensaries and stuff like that, where people, if they want to spend a little bit more for quality product, yes, you can go get a Molson Canadian, not a bad beer. You could pay a little bit more, get a Rickard's Red. Pretty good beer. But you could pay even more and go get a red beer made by a microbrewery that just absolutely quenches your palate. Those choices should be out there for the cannabis industry moving forward. That's what how craft cannabis fits into the plan for legalization. People have thought about this and been worried because of all these LPs, but in front of our legislative committees right now is not only the plan to legalize, but the must make changes in our medical programs. With those two in front of them, it's now or never to fight for that industry. Now I'll read an excerpt from this story. I know I kind of rambled, but I like this story. Not only could the country lose out on creating thousands of job opportunities, but they would also be missing out on the tourism that states like Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and soon Alaska are banking in on. Craft cannabis growers take more time and care with their plants and provide a much more personal touch, especially when compared to mass-produced plants. Quote, if you're selling cannabis in a liquor store in this tightly controlled regulatory environment, you're not creating tourism. There was no wine tourism, in BC until they began to deregulate the winery sector and allow for these wineries to pop up in the Okanagan. That spoken by Ian Dawkins, Executive Director of the Cannabis Growers of Canada. So he compares it to wine. I compared it to beer, but I should have compared it to wine. I grew up in the Okanagan. And it was true. The Okanagan has huge tourism because of the wine industry. There's hundreds of thousands of people go there simply just because of the wine industry. The cannabis industry can grow like this too. Thousands of jobs. We should not let our leaders talk ourselves out of it. Fight for your craft cannabis. We are at the end of Weedy Weekend. Oh, that's off. Can't get any more of that. We'll have one last toke to say goodbye. And I wish you a good week. I wish a happy July 4th to all of you Americans. And I hope you had a happy July 1, all of you Canadians. And keep the stories coming to me because I'll share your stories if you share them with me. Peace and cheers. Love and harmony.